Welcome back, everybody. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but I am hopefully going to be making videos all throughout the football season and into the off season. And I'm going to be starting with today, where I'm going to be making my SEC record predictions using this website called Playoff Predictor, as I'll bring it up now. Um, Yeah, and I'll be going through all these games and I'll be saying who I think will be winning these games. And at the end of this, because I'll be making one for each of the Power Four on Friday, I'll make my official playoff predictions based off of how I have each team finishing. And those will be my official predictions. So let's get into it. And starting off with some easy games, like Missouri hosting Central Arkansas, that's a win. Georgia, Georgia hosting Marshall, Arkansas hosting Alabama A&M, Oklahoma hosting Illinois State. UTSA could be a pretty um, sneaky team in the American, but Texas A&M's better. Florida hosting Long Island, that's a win. Vanderbilt hosting Charleston Southern, that's a win. And then Ole Miss hosting Georgia State. Um, those are all pretty easy wins. Yeah, so I'm not gonna go in depth to each game, just the ones that I think should be worth talking about. And starting off with this Friday opener, Auburn going to Baylor. Both teams, with surprising playoff aspirations. Auburn trying to get back to what they once were. Competing in the SEC, and Baylor, a really strong Big 12 team, hoping to use that 6-game winning streak at the end of the year, before their bowl game, continue it into this year. And I do think Baylor wins this game over Auburn. I'm not high on the Tigers as many other people are. I just don't really like Hugh Freeze, the greatest coach. Jackson Arnold struggled at Oklahoma last year in the SEC. Is he really going to do any better at Auburn? And I think Baylor, the better team at home, wins. Moving on to some Saturday games, the big one, Texas at Ohio State. Huge rematch of the college football playoff semifinal, which sent the Buckeyes to the national championship. But this time I have Texas at Columbus winning. I just trust the Longhorns more. Ohio State has a lot of new pieces. I mean, I don't even know who's going to be starting for them, whether it's Julian Sayon or Lincoln Keyholtz. Arch will be there. I just trust Texas, who is more returning production, to get this win. Moving on to Tennessee at Syracuse, and both these teams just announced their starting quarterback, Joey Aguilar, which was expected for Tennessee, and then the Notre Dame transfer, Steve Angeli, for Syracuse. As much as I want to go orange to upset Tennessee, as much as that offense really scares me because Joey Aguilar, what is he going to bring to the Volunteers after being at App State? But I think that defense is going to play really well, and I think Tennessee sneaks out a win. But I could see Syracuse pulling off this win, a neutral site game where anything is possible. Next up, Mississippi State, in-state matchup against Southern Miss. I really want to pick Southern Miss, but I just think Jeff Brom, you know, second year, I think he's going to have these Bulldogs playing better. I'm not saying they're going to win many games, but I think they're going to be a lot more competitive. And I think that means winning these early non-conference games to help them out. Toledo going to Kentucky. Kentucky coming off that horrible year. Will will the Wildcats be better? Toledo last year upset Mississippi State on the road. Could they do it again? I just think Kentucky gets that win. I could see the Rockets pulling off an upset, pulling off a huge win to show that They could be another force. Moving on to Alabama at Florida State at Doak Stadium, and I think the Noles win this game. Yeah, I think a lot of people would just think because Ryan Grubb's coming in, because this Alabama offense is supposed to get better, that they just expect them to be better. It was also just revealed that Jam Miller is going to be injured for Alabama, the running back, and miss 6 to 8 weeks with a broken collarbone. That'll hurt this offense. And I just think Florida State, it's happened the last 4 years. A top 10 team going against a Power 4 or Power 5, because in 23, 22, and 21 it was Power 5. But going on the road and losing to a Power Conference team. Last year, Florida State did it. Georgia Tech beat them. The prior year, it was Clemson losing to Duke. The prior year, Utah went to Florida and lost. So it's a trend of top 10 teams playing power teams on the road and losing. And I think it continues. I think the Noles pull off this upset and knock off Alabama. Then another SEC ACC matchup, LSU Clemson. I think the Tigers of Clemson at home win this. The whole discussion of which Steph Valley is the real one. Um, I'm not going to get into that discussion, but I just think Clemson, how good they were at the end of last year. I mean, they played Texas really hard in that playoff game, and I just think the Tigers get the win. Clemson Tigers. I'm also not really high on LSU compared to other people. And then the final week 1 matchup that we have, South Carolina going to Virginia Tech. And this will be at the same stadium, tennis at Syracuse, but this is that Sunday. That'll be the Saturday game. And I think the Gamecocks win. It'll be a close one, but I think South Carolina, Lenoris, Sellers, Shane Beamer, that South Carolina team is going to be amazing. And yeah, moving on to week 2, going to move on with some of like the easier matchups. Like Texas is going to be San Jose, A&M's beating Utah State, Georgia's going to beat Austin Peay, Tennessee beats Eastern Tennessee State. Florida will have a tough with South Florida, but I think they win. Arkansas beats Arkansas State. South Carolina beats South Carolina State. Auburn will beat Ball State. LSU will beat Louisiana Tech. And Alabama, I think, beats UNL. University of Louisiana Monroe. Now let's do the harder matchup, like renewal of the border war, I think it is. Kansas, Missouri. Kansas played really well at the end of last year. Not really caused some chaos in the Big 12. But those 3 wins, Missouri lost a lot of pieces to the NFL and are kind of in a transition year. But I think Missouri, the more talented team, will get it done. Moving on to our first SEC game, Ole Miss at Kentucky. And it really seems like recently Kentucky's had Ole Miss's number. Like, you look at last year, the Rebels, who had that revamped defense, Jackson Dart was coming back. It felt like it was their year. And at home, they lost to a Kentucky team that won just 4 games. And I think it happens again. I think Kentucky pulls off the upset. Early on, Austin Simmons, I think he's going to have, some things to work out. I think the Rebels, will be trying to figure out that defense that lost a lot of talent, not just up front, but also in the secondary and the linebacking core. And I think Kentucky can pull off this upset at home. Went on to Arizona State at Mississippi State last year. The Rose Bowl first. Mississippi State was going to ASU. I do think the Sun Devils win, but I think it's going to be a close game. At home. Those, not so great teams like Mississippi State will keep it competitive. I just think Arizona State, with much higher ambitions and a better talent, wins that game. Moving on to Michigan at Oklahoma. And I think Bryce Underwood is going to be under for a rude awakening in this game. I think Brent Venables is going to have that defense get after him. Kind of like, Austin Simmons with Ole Miss. Underwood, who hasn't officially been named the starter, but it seems like he will be the starter. I just think, that Oklahoma defense is going to get after him. And this offense, I really believe in to be much better. Like John Mateer coming in with his offensive coordinator from Washington State. I think this offense is going to be much better. You bring in Jaden Ott from Cal. The receiving core should be much healthier and better. And I think Oklahoma, just like last year, Michigan took on Texas and lost. I think they lose Oklahoma, and then Vanderbilt at Virginia Tech. Can Vandy win back-to-back years against the Hokies? I don't think it. I think Virginia Tech splits their two SEC games and pulls off the win. Moving on to week 3, Oklahoma beats Temple. Alabama beats Wisconsin. I am not high on Luke Fickell. Auburn, I think, beats South Alabama. Missouri beats Louisiana. Texas will beat UTEP. Mississippi State gets back on track with a win over Alcorn State. Kentucky moves to 3-0 after beating Eastern Michigan. Vanderbilt out South Carolina. Two teams who have kind of looked at as like the lower tier of the SEC compared to some of the other teams. I think South Carolina pulls this win off and moves to 3-0. I'm high on the Gamecocks to prove a lot of people wrong. Yes, they've lost a lot of defensive pieces, but I think the Gamecocks are going to be a lot better and a lot better than, and I think they're going to use that momentum, that 6-game winning streak they had at the end of the year. Had some adversity early on with those LSU and Alabama losses where they were so close to winning. I think that South Carolina starts off this year really strong, proving, hey, we can compete in the SEC. So moving on, Arkansas at Ole Miss. The Razorbacks, could this be like how they beat Tennessee last year? I don't really see it. I mean, it could happen. Austin Simmons, I said, first-year starter, will have some learning things, but I think they get back on track. You lose to Kentucky, but you get back a win to knock Arkansas out. Georgia at Tennessee. I feel like if Nico and that offense was how we probably viewed it entering the offseason before Nico transferred to UCLA, I feel like Tennessee could have had this win, could have knocked off Georgia, but it's just, I think this defense, kind of like we said when Tennessee played Syracuse in week 1, Georgia's defense, I think, will be great as always. And if Gunnar Stockton can be decent, not turning the ball over, but decent, kind of like Carson Beck in his first year in 2023. I think Georgia gets the win. Florida at LSU. We have the Gators undefeated going to LSU. Could this be a Florida win to go to 3-0? Could LSU go to 1-2? I think the Tigers get back on track, beat the Gators. After that loss to Clemson, bouncing back with back-to-back wins. And then Texas A&M undefeated taking on Notre Dame. I got the Fighting Irish moving on. Texas A&M. It will be a close game, maybe with better QB play, because Connor Wegman wasn't really the greatest last year. Maybe with better QB play, they can do it, but I think Notre Dame wins. Moving on to week 4, gotta get Tennessee beats UAB, Mississippi State beats NIU, though that could be a close one. Vanderbilt gets revenge on Georgia State. LSU knocks out Southeast. Louisiana and Texas beat Sam Houston State. Moving on to South Carolina and Missouri. Tigers, both teams undefeated. Um, I could see Missouri winning this week. I could see them moving to 4-0. Kind of like I could see this year being like 2023, where it's like everybody's a little lower on the Tigers, and then they have this great year. But I just believe in Sellers and Shane Beamer and the South Carolina team to win. Auburn at Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold returns to face on the Sooners. I'm just a lot higher on John Mateer and this Oklahoma team to win. Tulane at Ole Miss. This could be an interesting one. Jake Fritzloff, now the quarterback at Tulane, going on the road to Ole Miss. Could this be like an upset? Could Austin Simmons, potentially not play the greatest and he gets upset? It's possible, but I trust Lane Kiffin. I trust this Ole Miss team. Florida going to Miami. Very good game last year. Canes in week 1 dominated Florida. Could Florida return the favor? They could. But I think Miami wins here, dropping the Gators to 2-2. And then Arkansas heading to Memphis, heading to a really good American team. Could this be an upset where it's like Memphis, who could potentially be going to, facing off in the American Championship and possibly making the college football playoff? Could this be like a sign that they're very good? It could be, but I think Arkansas on the road gets the win to move to 3-1. We're on to week 5. Missouri back on track with that win over UMass, and then Vanderbilt beating Utah State. Went on Tennessee and Mississippi State. This could be an interesting one. Both teams I have at 3-1. Could Jeff Brohm find a way to win this week? Find a way to knock them off? You know what? I'm going to say the Bulldogs win this one. I'm going to say they pull off the upset. I was going to lead with Tennessee, but I think at home, Mississippi State, this could be like a huge upset win. Remember Tennessee last year? They went to Arkansas, and the Razorbacks were, I'm not really sure. I think they might have been like 3-2 or something like that. And then they pulled off the upset over Tennessee. I could see this. Kentucky at South Carolina, both teams undefeated heading into this game. I've got the Gamecocks moving to 5-0. Auburn at A&M. A&M coming up that Notre Dame loss. Auburn, 2 losses. Trying to get back on things, but I think Mike Elko and these Aggies win. LSU at Ole Miss. We've seen some pretty good games from these two. And I think Ole Miss pulls off the win, dropping LSU to 3-2. Notre Dame at Arkansas, Fayetteville. This could be a potential upset. Arkansas possibly, especially with like CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey, whoever's starting for Notre Dame. Early on in the season, could we see the Razorbacks, exposed, kind of like, when they lost to NIU? Could this be like that, upset loss where like people are like, what? And then later on in the year when Notre Dame starts to play better, it's like maybe they needed that wake-up call, but I think the Fighting Irish win. And then Bama at Georgia. Can Georgia get the revenge on Alabama? They could, but I think Kalen DeBoer and this Alabama Crimson Tide team are just built for big-time games, and I think they win. Moving on to week 6, Oklahoma moving to 5-0 over a win with Kent State. Mississippi State at A&M. Got the Aggies moving to 4-1. Vanderbilt at Alabama. Could this be a huge Vandy knockoff win? I think it could be. I got the Tide winning. Texas at Florida. Gators lost back-to-back. kind of, struggling right now, taking on an undefeated Texas Longhorns team who haven't played a conference game yet. Could this be a tricky one? I think Texas holds on to win, and then Kentucky at Georgia. I know last year Georgia played horribly against Kentucky, and Kentucky almost won. But when it has been in Athens, in Georgia, the Bulldogs have won, and I think they do it once again. Um, Washington State at Ole Miss, that could be an interesting game, and I think the Rebels go to 5-1. Georgia at Auburn, 4-1 Bulldogs coming off that win over Kentucky, taking on a 2-3 Auburn team, needing something to needing something. They kind of need this win to keep their season alive, but I don't think it happens. I think the Bulldogs win. South Carolina at LSU. Last year the Gamecocks almost knocked off LSU. Almost. They were like so close. I think LSU. This is a toughie. South Carolina. I think LSU pulls off the win, dropping the Gamecocks to 5-1. Florida at A&M. The 4-1 Aggies hosting Florida, who's lost 3 straight. Could this be a 4th straight loss? I don't think so. I think Florida on the road gets the win. Tennessee hosting Arkansas. 2 teams early on struggling, trying to get the first SEC win. I think Tennessee gets back in the winning column. Get some relief after last year's upset loss at Fayetteville. Alabama at Missouri. Could this be a huge upset for the Tigers? I don't see anything. The Tide win. And then Oklahoma at Texas. You see, I got both of them 5-0 in the Red River rivalry. But I think I just got to trust Sark in this Texas offense, dropping Oklahoma's first game, and Texas undefeated. Moving on to week 8, Missouri at Auburn. 2 teams, no conference wins. Auburn trying to get something, and I think Auburn wins this game, moving to 3-4. Oklahoma at South Carolina. 2 teams coming off hard losses. Who pulls it out? I think the Gamecocks drop Oklahoma's second game. Tennessee at Alabama. We got the Tide moving on. Texas A&M at Arkansas. No more neutral site. This will be at Fayetteville. 3-3 Arkansas team, a 4-2 Aggies team. This is a toughie. There's A&M moved to 5-2. I'm gonna say Arkansas wins, dropping the Aggies. Mississippi State at Florida. I think the Gators get back in the winning streak. Ole Miss at Georgia. I think the Bulldogs return last year's brutal loss into a win. Texas at Kentucky. This would be a huge upset. The Wildcats are at home. Obviously, I think Texas wins. LSU 4-2. They're going to a Vanderbilt team desperate for a win. I think the Tigers move to 5-2. Week 9, Texas A&M at LSU. 2 teams, 2 battling out. Both are 5-, or no, LSU's 5-2. A&M's 4-3. Where's the LSU? At home wins. Texas at Mississippi State. Undefeated Texas going on the road. I just trust the Longhorns so much. Ole Miss at Oklahoma. Two lost teams, and I think the Sooners getting back on track. Alabama at South Carolina. Both 1 loss. Both, fighting have a shot to make that SEC championship. I think South Carolina gets back from last year. They should have probably won that game, and I think the Gamecocks pull it off. Arkansas hosting Auburn. Say Arkansas wins that one. Tennessee at Kentucky. Got the Vols. And then Vanderbilt, Missouri. The only two teams left with no confidence wins. I got the Commodores winning this one. Week 10. Kentucky at Auburn. Got the Tigers winning that. Arkansas hosting Mississippi State. I got Arkansas. South Carolina going to Ole Miss. 7-1, going to 5-3. Ole Miss. I'm gonna say Ole Miss pulls off the upset. Oklahoma going to Tennessee. I've got a lot more faith in Oklahoma's offense and defense as a whole. Which is why I think they pull off the win. Vanderbilt going to Texas. I got the Longhorns. Georgia at Florida. Georgia at Florida. Last year we saw DJ Lagway. I mean, if he had stayed in that game, they could have won that game. I think they do it this year. Knock off the Bulldogs. Texas A&M at Missouri. Missouri, no conference wins yet. Texas A&M. I'm going to say Missouri wins. Getting their first SEC win. Alabama hosting LSU. I think the Tide win. Florida going to Kentucky. This could be a surprise upset. Kentucky trying to get that win. And I think Florida wins it. Auburn going to Vanderbilt. Two teams struggling. I got the Commodores. Georgia going to Mississippi State. This could be, especially if Gunnar Stockton's not playing the greatest. Maybe Mississippi State could upset him, but I got the Bulldogs. The Citadel, Ole Miss gets back on track. Arkansas going to LSU. We got 2 3-loss teams, LSU and Arkansas. So 2 battling it out. I got the Tigers. I got Missouri Tigers winning 2. South Carolina going to A&M. A&M, maybe they want to get revenge from that loss last year. 4-5. I've got the Aggies. 7-2. I got South Carolina. I say A&M pulls off the upset, giving South Carolina the 3rd loss. Oklahoma going to Alabama. I think the Tide win that one. Texas going to Georgia. We saw it last year. I think Georgia wins again, dropping Texas, their first loss. I don't think any SEC team, I don't think any of the SEC teams finish undefeated in conference play or otherwise. Florida at Ole Miss. I got the Gators on the road pulling it off. And then I got Kentucky and Tennessee pulling off wins. LSU, South Carolina win. A&M, Georgia, Auburn, and Alabama again, easy victories. Tennessee at Florida. I think Florida gets back at the Vols and wins this one. Texas hosting Arkansas. I think Texas wins. And then Kentucky, Vanderbilt. Got the Commodores, and then I got Oklahoma beating Missouri. Final week, got the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss at Mississippi State. I'm gonna say Mississippi State pulls off the win at home. Georgia at Georgia Tech. I think the Yellow Jackets do win it this year. Texas, I think, finishes out beating A&M. Auburn at Alabama. Could Auburn win this one? They could possibly, but I think Alabama punches their ticket to the SEC championship game. Oklahoma beating LSU. Missouri, Arkansas. I'm gonna say Arkansas wins that one. Florida, I think, beats Florida State to finish 9-3. Tennessee, Vanderbilt. I got Tennessee finishing 7-5. Kentucky loses, and then Clemson out South Carolina. So the Gamecocks win, finishing 9-3. Yeah, final standings: Texas 11-1. One loss to Georgia. It's a pretty easy schedule. Ohio State and Florida, two hard games. Um, but pretty manageable. Alabama losing to Florida State and South Carolina, but rest of it pretty manageable. That Georgia game will be a toughie, but I think Kalen DeBoer and this Alabama team get it done. So that's your SEC championship game. Florida 9-3. You know, three losses early, but seven consecutive wins. Clinched huge wins over Georgia, A&M, and Ole Miss. Speaking of Georgia, three losses to Alabama, Florida, and then I think Georgia Tech pulls it off this year. Um, we saw they almost did it last year. I think they do it this year. South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss, and A&M. Yeah, I can see them winning over Ole Miss or A&M or LSU. 9-3. Oklahoma. Three losses: Texas, South Carolina, and then Alabama. But I think they get back to winning. LSU, not high on the Tigers as other people are, and four losses, could say 5, 6, depending on how some of these other games shape out. Arkansas 7-5. Um, Another decent year. Tennessee, if Nico was there and if the offense was a lot more potent, I could have picked the Volunteers to upset maybe Georgia, Oklahoma, and get more wins. But right now, I just can't see it. A&M 6-6. Worse from last year, but I mean they kind of faded off after early on. Seven. I think they were 7-1, and then went 1-4 in the last 5 games, including a bowl game. Vanderbilt, another 6-6 average year. Missouri, really easy non-conference. And Kansas will be a tough one, but outside of that, should be really easy. And then when it comes to the SEC straight, I just don't see many wins. Mississippi State, I think, improves. Huge wins over Ole Miss and Tennessee. I could see them happen. I could see them beating Georgia if they're not up to par. Auburn, just not high on Hugh Freeze and Jackson Arnold and this Tiger team. And then Kentucky, another bad year, but an upset went over Ole Miss. And yeah, so that's it, guys. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you guys subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for my Big Ten video. Bye.